back to my channel Kuluru. So I'll continue the expense tracker playlist. So in the last video we stopped at this point, that is we wrote a transaction repository. Okay, we wrote this transaction repository and the last function we wrote was the get transaction by type. So today we'll try to wind up the domain layer as much as possible. So now we had written the models repository, so the only thing pending in this domain layer is the use cases. So okay, use cases, since we are following the clean architecture, in order to call any functions we are defined in these repositories, that has to be done through the use cases. Okay, so let's create the package called use case. Okay, and in this let me segregate. We can do it any way we want, but I want to have the proper directory structure, so I will segregate like read and write operations on database, like read database, write database, read data store and write data store, and so on, and put the respective use cases underneath each of them. Okay, so let me first write new package called read database. Okay, so in this, first let's create our use case one, that is get 3-day transaction. Okay, so let me write that use case name, get 3-day transaction. Okay, so this is class, right, and perform constructor injection to inject the transaction repository. Okay, so transaction repository, and now we will write the invoke function, and the parameter would be the transaction type string. Okay, and this would return flow of list of transaction DTO, right? Fine, and here we will just call the transaction repository function, that is get 3-day transaction, and pass this. And so here the use of the invoke is, if we do it like this, while we are referring to this use case in our presentation layer, if we call, we can directly call with the use case name, like this. For example, for the above in invoke, if we write like get 3-day transaction and pass that particular transaction type, let's say for example income. So if you do it, if you call like this in our presentation layer, this will invoke this and get the job done. Okay, so fine, so that was the use case one. Again we will write the all use cases, that is we'll just take this and change the naming convention for other use cases. Okay, so that is get 7-day transaction. Okay, fine, so let me do that here. Only thing is I will change the name to 7-day transaction, and here also to 7-day transaction. Okay, right, I think this is same, right, same as the previous one, that's why we directly wrote that, right? Correct. Now let's do the same for the 14-day transaction as well. So let me create the class use case name get 14-day transaction. Okay, so let me do it this and do here, just replace 3 with 14 and here also with 14. Okay, so this is 14-day transactions. So right now the other use case is the get account. So let's see the transaction repository, so we wrote these 3. So now we will write the get accounts use case. Okay, so let me write that class, that is get accounts use case. Okay, so I can name this as get 3-day transaction use case, get 7-day transaction use case, but how I wish again. So here again I'll do constructor injection, okay, and call transaction repository, okay, and do same to invoke that particular repository function. Okay, here it will return flow of list of accounts DTO, right? Flow of list of account DTO. Okay, so this will return transaction repository to get accounts. Okay, so that was the get accounts use case. Now there is again singular account function as well, right? Get account use case. So we will write that function now. Use case, that is get account use case. Okay, and do same here as well, that is inject constructor and then call transaction repository, okay, and operator fun invoke, and for this we need the account as the parameter, okay, which is a type string, and this will return account DTO, flow of account DTO. Okay, and we will call that respective function in the transaction repository. Okay, so we return get 3-day transaction, get 7-day transaction, 14-day accounts use case, account use case. Next we will write the get all transactions use case. Okay, let me write that, that is get all transactions use case. Okay, so I will inject constructor and do same here, call transaction repository and write operator from invoke, and here we have to return the flow of list of transaction DTO, right, and call respective function in the transaction repository, that is transaction repository get all transactions. Okay, fine. So now we will write the get current day transactions. Okay, 1 second, that is get current day expense transaction use case. Okay, and inject transaction repository okay, and call invoke. So here it will be again flow of list of, I think I should import this, just a second. Okay, and this would return list of transaction DTO. Fine. So here I will call that respective function in the transaction repository, that is get current day expense transaction. Fine. So next we will write the get daily transaction use case. Okay, fine. So let me name here it as get daily transaction use case. Correct. Fine. So I will inject transaction repository again. Transaction repository and call invoke function, and here it will be the input parameter will be entry date. Okay, entry date string, and it will be return type would be flow of list of transaction DTO. Okay, so let me call the respective function in transaction repository. Fine. So this was get daily transaction use case, and now the next use case which we will write is the get last month transactions use case. Okay, so let me write that. Get last month transaction use case. Okay, so yeah, and again inject transaction repository and call operator invoke function, and here the here get last month transaction, we should specify the type of the transaction, that is income or expense, right? So here parameter will be transaction type, input parameter, and it would return flow of list of transaction videos. And now we will just call respective function in the transaction repository, that is get last month transaction, and I will pass transaction type. Okay, so this is about get last month transaction use case. And now we will write the get monthly expense transaction use case. Get monthly transaction use case. So let me write anything is fine. Let me write here get monthly expense transaction, so that okay, and inject the transaction repository. Okay, and call invoke function. So here input parameter is nothing, and it will return flow of list of transactions DDU, and it will call, then we'll call respective function in transaction repository. Okay, so we have written the last month the monthly expense transaction use case. So next we'll write the start of the month transactions use case. Okay, so that is get last month transaction use case. Okay, sorry, it is start month, we just wrote the last month already, so that is get start of month transaction use case. Okay, so let me name again do the constructor injection of the transaction repository. Transaction. Okay, and call invoke function. So here again input parameter will be the type of transaction, that is income or the expense. So here we will pass that parameter transaction type string, and it will return flow of list of transaction DTO, and then I will return by calling respective function in the transaction repository. One second. Get did I not write start? Yeah, I guess so. So let me write that first. Get last month. I have written here. Okay, start of the month transaction. Okay, fine. That is start of the month transaction, and it will be transaction type. Okay, so we have written the start of the month transaction as well. Now we will write the transaction by account, that is by cash account, bank account, and or card account. So we'll write that use case as well. Get account by type use case. Okay, and do the same constructor injection again. Private while transaction repository. Okay, and call invoke function, and here we have to specify again account type as input parameter. Okay, and this would return just flow of list of transaction DTO. Okay, this is not get account by type use case. This is get transaction by account. Sorry, I mistaken here. So let me rename this. Get transaction by account. Okay, transaction by account use case. Okay, so here we will return the flow of list of transaction DTO. Okay, and call respective function in the transaction repository, that is get transaction by account type, and I'll pass account type here. Fine, so that was the transaction by account type, and the next is get the transaction by type use case. Okay, let me write that use case. Transaction by type use case. Okay, so let me call same constructor injection for transaction repository. Okay, and call the operator from invoke function, and here again the input parameter would be the transaction type. Okay, and this will return flow of list of transaction DTO. Okay, so let me call the respective function in transaction repository, that is get transaction by type, and I'll pass transaction type here. Okay, now we're almost done. Only thing we are left with the get weekly expense transaction use case. Okay, for reading database. So that we'll write the one last use case in this read database, that is get weekly expense transaction use case. Okay, so I will write this in constructor inject transaction repository, and I will invoke, I'll call the invoke and here we will return straight away flow of list of transactions reviewed. Okay, so let me return by calling the respective function in the transaction repository, that is get weekly expense transaction. Okay, so these are all the use cases that comes under the reading database. So I thought to wind up the domain layer in this video, but it's pretty much long, so I'll stop here for now. So we'll continue the other use cases in the coming video and try to wind up in that video at least. Okay, so thank you so much for your time, and keep watching the channel. There'll be a lot more exciting content coming up your way. Thank you so much.